The dispatcher said 2 kids, boy and a girl, showed up on a lady's doorstep. Lady said the kids wouldn't talk or give their names. She gave them milk and cookies and sent them to rest in her bed because they looked tired. No children had been reported missing, but it was late, so the dispatcher thought the parents didn't know their kids were gone. No problem. Not my first call about kids that walked out the front door because they wanted to play. At least it wasn't winter. I drove to the house on the outskirts of Bridal Veil Lake. It looked like another farm sold off for condos that were never built. A bunch of wild fields and dirt surrounded the lady's house. It was remote and dark, and I wondered if she felt comfortable living alone out here. That knock in the middle of the night must have been a shock. I announced my presence and knocked lightly. "Hello?" An old woman, the lady, answered. "Hello," she said. "Hello," I said again. "How are you doing tonight, ma'am?" "Been better. They're in the bedroom. Sleeping, I think." She stepped aside to let me in. I saw 2 shapes beneath a quilt in the darkened bedroom. "There was no one else? You didn't see anybody?" She shook her head. "Were they injured? Scared?" "No, just shy. Really shy." She nodded towards the kitchen, which I could see from where I stood. Not a big house. "They hardly ate." There were 2 neat piles of chocolate chip cookies beside full cups of milk. It all looked completely untouched. The sight made me antsy. She said they didn't eat much. They ate something then, but not a crumb had fallen on the table? Nuh-uh. I have 3 kids. Never saw them leave a cookie intact or at all. Something really bad must have happened with these children. "Hi, kids," I said quietly from the doorway of the bedroom. I didn't want to startle them. "Are you awake?" No answer, but I had to check on them. There was only a lamp for the room, and it barely lit anything. 2 small shapes lay with their whole bodies and heads covered with the quilt, completely still. "I'm a policeman," I said. "I'm here to help you. You don't have to be scared." I waited. Still nothing. "I'm going to pull off this blanket very slowly just so you can see me, okay? Then you can put it right back, if that makes you feel safe." Nothing. They didn't move a muscle. I prepared for the worst and pulled off the quilt. Their eyes were black, shiny and lifeless. Jesus. Because these were not living children, but life-sized dolls, complete with clothing and realistic hair. Only the eyes and their plastic faces looked immediately fake. "What the hell?" I stomped out, admittedly pissed off. The lady waited in her living room chair. "Is this a joke?" "Excuse me?" "Those aren't real kids," I said. "They're dolls." She became confused. "I beg your pardon?" I took a breath and tried to calm down. "Ma'am, are you on any medication or—" She got up and went to the bedroom. Jesus Christ, save us. I shouldn't have let her see. The lady fainted at the foot of the bed. I called it in, and everyone had a good laugh about the dolls. Except me. The lady had been prescribed blood thinners and a nasal spray for seasonal allergies. Unless she did other non-prescribed drugs, she had nothing hallucinogenic in her system. That meant she probably had a tumor or dementia. A gas leak could also be a possibility. I mulled over these details while I escorted the ambulance to the hospital. She wasn't unconscious for long, but didn't fight my suggestion to see a doctor. "Thank you," she said from a stretcher, squeezing my hand, just before the paramedics wheeled her into the ER. I nodded. I didn't know what to say. It's my job to help. I followed them in. Sometimes doctors want to ask us questions. The cafeteria called to me. 4 more hours till the end of my shift. Coffee and a sandwich seemed prudent. I hardly touched them. The walkie crackled. There had been an assault at the hospital. Obviously, I responded. "Someone's been attacked," dispatch said. "The nurse that called wasn't very clear, and she hung up." I got up from the table the same time a doctor descended the steps into the food court and shouted something incomprehensible. When he got close, I grabbed him by the shoulders. "She's dead," the doctor said. "Gone. He killed her." It took a bit to understand. I'll summarize. The old lady I'd escorted to the hospital had been murdered by another patient, a young man suffering from unmedicated schizophrenia. He'd been brought into the ER after being hit by a car. "I thought he was sleeping," the doctor had told me. He sat on the floor with his head in his hands. "Oh God, her head. He cut off her head." Apparently, he walked down the hallway with it. Then he sat down and chatted with staff until the police arrived. I never left the food court, so I was spared the scene. It still messed me up. She'd thanked me. I'd sent her to her grisly death. A tragedy. That's what everyone, including my therapist, said, and I eventually agreed. I believed it. For years, I didn't think about those dolls unless someone brought them up. The old woman had probably been suffering from some kind of delusion. No point in finding out what exactly with her gone. Probably wouldn't even be possible. Then, I got another call. "What? What did you just say?" This dispatcher didn't know about the kids and the dolls. That was half a decade ago by this point.
"Can you hear me?"
"Yes."
"North side. A gentleman says 2 kids showed up on his doorstep. No missing children reported tonight."
"A girl and a boy, the kids?" I asked.
"Yeah, how'd you know?"
I didn't explain. "I'm on it, but send more constables, please." So many similarities to the previous tragedy. The time of year, the wrong side of midnight, and the kids gaining entry to the home. Except that hadn't happened last time. They were dolls, I reminded myself. I would go to the house, on the posh side of town, and find actual kids there. Then I would do my job and get them home. Fear against resolve, I gripped the steering wheel too tight and my fingers went numb. Big, dead hot dog fingers trembled when I got out of the cruiser in the big driveway. No lights were on in the mansion at the top of the hill. I'd hoped the other constables would have arrived, but I was alone again. It took me a few moments to calm down and not call dispatch for an ETA. As I approached, I could see the front door had been left slightly open. My flashlight revealed a foyer big enough to fit a house. Since there hadn't been a crime reported, I felt confident to call out to the owner. "Hello?" An echo replied. The place really was that big. "Bridal Veil Lake PD. Your front door is open, sir." I rang the doorbell and waited a bit. Nobody showed. I don't know why I didn't call dispatch or wait for the other constables. The only reason I went in, I think, was because I had to know if history was repeating. "I'm coming in." The switches were dead. No power. Grand staircases wrapped the foyer in a broad embrace, and in the center, they were there, propped up against a headless storyteller. At first, I didn't understand, and I tried talking. "It's gonna be okay," I said to a headless man. He'd been posed with an oversized Grimm's fairy tale book between his thigh and arm. Before each of the black-eyed dolls, set up to appear as attentive children, a tall glass of milk and a bowl of chips had been placed and left untouched. I choked out a gasp. It couldn't be. It couldn't be. How could the dolls be here? Attempts to draw my firearm and use my radio went about as well as you can imagine. The gun hit the marble floor, and I communicated nothing of use to dispatch. Maybe that was good. I might have shot the other constables when they showed up. They found me on my knees and hysterical. I kept pointing at the dolls. They thought I meant the headless victim. "It's gonna be okay," one of them said, and it felt like I'd said it, or this constable had been cloned from my cells. Funny, the place is a shattered mind wanders. "Okay?" I asked. I don't remember much after that. I went to the hospital. They had to sedate me. I wouldn't stop talking about the dolls. Olive and Matthew. my therapist said. He'd come to visit and explain what had happened. It's a terrifying coincidence, he said. Those dolls are the same, yes, from the last incident. Apparently they didn't belong to the woman who passed. I don't know why this information horrified me. Well, who the hell do they belong to? I shouted. It's all right, he said. It's not entirely what you think. He really pissed me off. Look, just fucking explain it then. Right, sorry. Okay, the dolls weren't known to the relatives. They claimed the lady who'd been decapitated didn't like dolls of any kind. She found them creepy. Your colleagues put them into evidence for lack of a better option. They were sold at auction. And the rich guy bought them? No, my therapist said. But somebody did. And that person, well, they're the killer, I'm afraid. A man was discovered in the mansion basement, covered in blood and with the head. I thought you said it'd be all right. The man was mentally ill, he went on. But he bought those dolls. Maybe he even called about the kids. Do you see what I'm saying? Some kind of copycat killing? He shrugged his bony shoulders in his tweed coat. That's the only thing that makes sense. Perhaps he knew the other schizophrenic man that killed that woman. The important thing to note is that nothing supernatural is occurring. The therapist smiled. What? It's an unfortunate coincidence, I mean. That bullshit smile twitched. I've been around long enough to know when someone is pulling a con. I never thought it was supernatural, I said. Why did you say that? He chuckled nervously. An unfortunate choice of words. I didn't mean to imply that... How do you know the names? The names? Of the dolls, I said, before attempting to get out of the hospital bed. Handcuffs held my wrists. The sedatives had prevented this observation, until the urge to punch the therapist moved my body. What the hell's going on? Why are you telling me this? You're not from the department. What the fuck is happening? He backed away towards the door. Calm down. The killer named them. He kept saying the names over and over. The inspector contacted me. She thought it best I talk to you. I agreed, and... Bullshit. He suddenly went mute with his lips mouthing the words, "Help me," over and over. His eyes darted to the little window in the door. At the same time, a shadow passed over his face. The therapist shivered and sniffled back tears. You should run, he said. His last words. All at once, the man collapsed. What the fuck? Help! Help! I shouted. The nurses came and did their thing, but he was gone. He's gone? I asked. They stopped trying to revive him. One of them confirmed it. How had he died? A real tragedy. Another unfortunate coincidence. The deceased therapist had an unknown aneurysm that just happened to trigger while he begged for help and a shadow crossed the window. Bullshit. I took his advice. After my wife picked me up from the hospital, I told her I would take early retirement. She looked relieved until I told her we needed to leave Bridal Veil Lake. I purchased a cottage up north on Oxbow Lake. My family didn't come. Who can blame them? I didn't think they were in danger until I learned everybody is, and there are no safe places. They came on the third night. At first, the knocking struck too softly. I thought I imagined it. Then it became more persistent, more rapid. I didn't move from the recliner or even lower the footrest. I just watched the door and did my best not to breathe too loudly. The knocking continued with a desperate urgency. Then tiny fingernails scratched at the door. Soft weeping followed that. A child, for sure. I could no longer be idle. I went to the window and peeked through the curtains. The expected pair, Olive and Matthew, wept in the gloom of the stoop. They weren't dolls. They were kids. Flesh, blood, and human. I relented and opened the door. The very images of the dolls looked up at me. Misery and fatigue had captured the innocence from their faces. I know what an overtired child looks like. This wasn't that. The little boy and girl hadn't rested in days. They swayed on their feet, avoiding collapse by way of fear of something greater. I just didn't know what yet. I'm not crazy. I don't believe in ghosts or whatever shit this was supposed to be. I hadn't been drinking anything but pop. And there were no gas leaks in the cottage, or the monoxide detectors would be going off. The kids were real, and they were scared. But so was I. I grabbed their arms and basically tossed them behind me into the living room. It's so dark on Oxbow Lake with a million places to hide. I shut the door and threw the bolt. Olive and Matthew clutched one another by the recliner. "What's going on?" I asked. "Who are you? How'd you get here?" They stared, but not at me or anything. Both were underweight and filthy. A combination of urine and stale sweat emanated from their simple clothes. "Go to the couch," I said. "Lie down." Completely aware of the pattern I was fulfilling, I went to the kitchen and grabbed some apples and cheese. I set it down on the coffee table. "Eat," I said. Neither would look at the food. "Eat," I said, louder. They had to eat. It felt crucial. If they ate, then they were real, because the food would be gone, and that seemed like tangible proof of their existence. Olive yawned. Matthew's expression contorted with scorn, while his bottom lip trembled. He seemed angry with her. She looked ashamed. Both started crying again. "What the hell happened to you?" I dialed 911 and went through the process of summoning the police. The dispatcher thought I was crazy when I demanded a severe response. "You'll be lucky to see a constable within an hour, sir," she said. "You're so far away." I couldn't argue with that, but tried anyway. "I'll be dead before that. Something isn't right." I told her about the dolls and my time with BVLP. She listened intently because of her training. Talking was good. Talking meant life and focus off whatever she might believe I could be capable of. The call hadn't gone well, in other words. I'd simply cast myself as a crazy, possibly dangerous suspect. I hung up. Maybe they'd get here fast because of the kids. Maybe I'd be beheaded, long before a hope of rescue. The kids leaned into the cushions, closed their eyes, and immediately fell asleep. No bites had been taken from the food. I got my gun from the bedroom. When I returned, the dolls were beside them. All four could be mistaken for sleeping children. A tall, disheveled man stood by the peeled screen of the open window. Only his fingernails, bitten and jagged, caught the edge of the lamplight. Shadowed lips muttered gibberish at first, but then his words became clear. "Dolls don't eat. Dolls don't eat. Dolls don't eat." I aimed. He lunged. I fired. He staggered, but not before wrapping his large hands around the barrel of my gun. I put another bullet through him, and yet he didn't fall. With surprising strength, he smacked me across the face. I dropped the gun. He retrieved it, and somehow our positions in the living room were reversed. He stood near the couch. The real kids had run away. Only their simulacrums remained. I stood near the expertly sliced screen of the front window. The man's narrow head resembled a crescent moon. He appeared confused by the blood exiting his body as he struggled to level the gun. I wasn't about to wait around for him to figure it out. I leapt through the open window as a bullet shattered the glass above my head. My ass hit dirt and I tore off into the pitch black of the forest, figuring I'd hide somewhere until the police arrived. And for a while that worked. I lay in the midst of some thorny brush. Scratched me up good, until enough time had passed that the man had to be dead from blood loss. I endured the escape from the brambles, crawling until something firm pressed between my shoulder blades. "There you are," said a voice, impossibly calm and smooth. Don't move. I have you. The blade is sharp, and I have done this before. I did as he said, and remained as still as my fear would allow. Of course, you understand something about it now. When I remained silent, he ordered an answer, punctuating the request with the tip of his knife. You make them knock on doors in the night. They're supposed to be like dolls. And if they're not, then the caretakers have to die, he finished. Olive and Matthew must become the same as their dolls. Exactly the same. Why? The knife point penetrated slightly. That's not for you to know. We're only here because of bad luck. You happened upon 2 instances of their training. They were so little that first time. They're older now, but don't look it. We don't let them grow much. You cut off that woman's head in the hospital, I accused. The knife pressure relaxed slightly. Perhaps I was wrong, and you don't get it. But then I did, and the tension forced me to reveal everything. You didn't kill that woman. You didn't kill the rich guy. And you weren't going to kill me. The moon-faced guy had been a ringer for murder just like the other 2. Where did he find so many mentally ill people to take the fall? He'd need access. He'd have to be a doctor of some kind. Or a therapist. You're alive, I said. You didn't die in the hospital. No aneurysm. How is that possible? The nurses... The therapist laughed. Elementary, my dear Watson. I made up a story for the nurses. Told them you were dangerous and obsessed with me. I needed to cut contact with you and, well, certainly dramatic. They were all too willing to help out a colleague. You wanted me to go far away, I said. I hoped you would, but never thought you'd be so dense as to choose yet another perfectly isolated location for me to work. You would have been much safer in your old home. I was too scared to feel stupid. Now, we're going back in to see Olive and Matthew, he said. My poor slave is likely dead, so it's my turn to cut. And that's fine. I'm out of practice, but there's no need to rush. Why let the victims contact the police? The children have to see that no one can help them. They are mine. Makes it more fun, too. But why the dolls? You're leaving a trail. He snickered. Less than breadcrumbs. Only you've connected 2 of the scenes, and I've left dozens over the years. Granted, the last one was dramatic. I couldn't help myself. I wanted Olive and Matthew to see what happens to good people when they disappoint me. I thought of Olive's yawn, and how hungry they must be. One of them ate. The knife pierced my skin, and I gasped and writhed. Dolls, he seethed. Don't eat. Now get up. Up. Into the house and... The distant thrum of an engine filled the otherwise perfect quiet of the lake. Noise travels easily across water, so he waited and listened. When it became clear a vehicle approached, he drew in a sharp breath and exhaled slowly, calming himself. Well, someone's coming. It happens. Are you going to kill me? The pressure of the knife tip evaporated like the presence of the psychopathic therapist. I leapt to my feet and threw a wild punch into the dark. Nothing but air swept over my knuckles. Coward, I said. I won't keep quiet. I'm not afraid. I lied. Badly. I'll find you. I'll find those kids. You hear that? I'm coming, Olive. Matthew. He chuckled, already some indeterminate distance away. Good luck. Tell anyone you think cares or will believe you. Headlights bounced down the narrow dirt road. The front door of the cottage opened and filled with the therapist. I screamed and rushed him and realized my next mistake too late. The man wasn't the therapist, but an off-duty park warden. keenly aware of his surroundings and the clumsy charge of an old, wounded cop. He flipped me with some kind of judo. I landed across the coffee table, on the untouched food, facing the black-eyed dolls. A pair of cuffs came next. I ranted about the dolls and the therapist and the children to no avail. They found the moon-faced martyr crouched by the broken window. Even dead, he still appeared confused. The warden used his cell to call for more support. The dispatcher had only called him because she knew he lived near Oxbow Lake. I told the story so many times, and begged them to look for the therapist and those kids. Hours later, someone must have called him, because they came back with another unfavorable fabrication. The therapist had never left Bridal Veil Lake, and answered the call from Huntsville police on the landline of his phone. He drove back. I said, Huntsville and Oxbow Lake is roughly 5 hours away from Bridal Veil Lake. I'd been questioned for 6. He also told us about your condition. I laughed. Sure, of course. But what about the break-in and the dolls? The constables looked at one another. We asked about that. He said it's possible, perhaps even likely given your trauma, that you took those dolls from evidence. That's where they were after your last discovery. You had access and a reason to dwell on them. A reason? They were choosing their words carefully. What about the intruder? He's local, an addict, really ill. He's been arrested for breaking into cottages before. He usually goes for empty ones. He just moved to Oxbow. Even with lights on and a vehicle out front, he probably didn't realize it was occupied. You surprised him. I surprised him? I asked incredulously. After many more protests, I was released and told to be grateful. An investigation would follow, of course, but no charges would be laid unless something more incriminating was found. It won't be, I said bitterly. The constable walking me out of the Huntsville station just shook his head and walked away. Man doesn't know how lucky he is. Before I could object, the door was shut. I packed my shit and raced home. I didn't have my gun, of course, but figured he wouldn't be armed at his office. If he was, it'd be with that knife. In a fair fight, I'd take it and cut his damn head off. Ignoring the protests of his secretary and the man seated in his treatment room, I found him. He appeared alarmed, scared. What's the matter? What? I scoffed. Didn't expect to see me again? I moved closer to his desk and he stood up before backing away to the large window. We were on the 5th floor of the building. Where are they? Who? I braced my foot against his desk and pushed it slowly until his legs were trapped against the sill. Olive. Matthew. He yelped when I pushed harder. I swear, the police in Huntsville, they called. I understand something happened to you up there, but I can assure you. You died in the hospital, I seethed. Right in front of me. He looked to the other man in the room, his patient. I didn't visit you in the hospital. I'm not dead. Your PTSD must have caused a psychotic break and... Liar. We argued more, but then the BVLP showed up, and I was strongly encouraged to leave, which I did. I refrained from telling him this isn't over, because I'd be arrested. He knew anyway. He counted on it. I went home next, and tried to talk to my wife and my family. He'd called them first, and told them to be careful and call the police if I began behaving erratically. My story, of course, fell into that category. You can't stay here, my wife said, and it hurt to know that she couldn't believe me and never would. I left without argument. He found me later in the park at night. The nervous demeanor had been left behind for his patients and the rest of the world. He lit a cigarette and asked if I wanted one. You son of a bitch, I said. He exhaled a plume into the air. So now you understand. How I'm about to kill you? Sure. I had nothing to lose. They're dead if I am, he said, completely calm. Seems like I'd be doing them a favor. He pulled a small pistol from his coat. No one would be surprised I carried this and shot a crazed attacker. What the fuck do you want? I had nothing left to give him or anyone. No one gets away. They have to know. So you're gonna kill me? Eventually, yes. I will come. And we'll finish what we started. They'll knock in the night and you'll answer the door. Let them in and offer them food. Which they won't eat. He nodded. Because they're dolls. If they're not by then, he said, then it'll be over. I'll find others. But I think they'll do fine. Tell me why you're doing this. I'm as good as dead anyway. He held a cigarette in clenched teeth while he smiled. You'd be shocked how much one will pay for a doll of mine. Quite shocked indeed. That's not why you do this, I said. Not enough of me remained to shed a tear. I felt hollow. Dead already. I couldn't be shocked anymore. When they knocked, I would open that door. I would try to help them. Though it seemed futile and failure so certain. He backed away until confident I wouldn't follow. I stayed in the park the rest of the night, but moved into the motel where I currently live the next day. Now, I wait. I typed this all out and put it here, so maybe, when I'm gone, when I'm headless, someone will look for those poor kids and give them something to eat. This is my last low hope. Thank you. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jordan Group Horror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward. And if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you, which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.